the one source, Sports Card Nation. The hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What is up, everybody? Episode 267. As always, glad to be back. Hope your 2024 is going splendidly so far. So far, so good. Here, got a great guest today, Mr. Nick Andrews, Boston card hunter and one half of the Sports Card Madness podcast. And he's going to be on today. He's building some insane, complete sets, all autographed, all authenticated, and one is complete, and he's very close to a second one. I'll tease you there. You have to listen to find out the sets if you don't already know. And we're going to chop up the hobby as well. And had real fun conversating with Nick, good guy, and doing very, very busy guy, and doing good things. And again, we're going to talk about these two sets that he's very close. Well, one's done, and one is about to be completed, and incredible stuff. So, without further ado, let's get this party started.
Hobby Hotline is the hobby's only live interactive call-in show. Join some of your favorite hobby personalities every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, and the first Tuesday of each month at 9 p.m. Eastern to discuss the hottest hobby topics. If you miss us live, catch us after the fact on all major podcast platforms. Follow us on socials at Hobby Hotline.
All right, real excited to be joined by my next guest on the Sports Card Shop guest line. He is a podcaster in his own right from the Sports Card Madness podcast. Nick Andrews, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for coming on. It's around the holidays time, and so appreciate you making some time for us. It's kind of first time on this podcast, kind of the age old boring kind of hobby start, hobby background, what you collect, how you got into this crazy hobby. I always kind of start off with that one.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I collected as a kid in the 80s and got all of the junk wax like everybody else. And, I loved baseball cards back then. And I even had like a teaching assignment where I'd send some of these cards off and try to get them signed. It was really cool. Like, I think I got Ryan Sandberg back and stuff. And I did some of the Red Sox players because I'm from Boston. And it was really fun. And then I did it a little bit more in the 90s with basketball players like Karl Malone and stuff like that. Collected a little bit there. And then I went completely dormant really until, 2018, 19, a little bit before COVID. I started getting back into the modern stuff just because my son, he's 9. So he's starting to he likes cards and likes collecting and likes watching sports. So I got into it a little bit. Then I quickly realized that I don't love most of the modern stuff. And I got really heavily into vintage, and not just vintage, but signed vintage. So I put together the entire 1986 Fleer basketball set autographed last year. And I'm working on 1969 Topps, the tall boys right now. I'm like 91 out of 99. So I like sort of like the high-end vintage stuff, the signed stuff they don't make anymore. That's pretty rare. But I got a little bit of room for modern things. I mean, my son wants to watch Jason Tatum play, and he likes to collect Jason Tatum cards. So I'm cool with that too.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's crazy with those sets. I mean, that's quite an undertaking. We're definitely going to talk more about that as well. And much like you said, vintage for me, as a dealer, I kind of carry both, but my heart is more on the vintage side of things, probably for similar reasons, right? It's just harder to find. The presses aren't still running on that stuff. What out there is out there for the most part. And, being older, I'm 51, I'm vintage. So it just sort of makes sense to lean that way. Like I mentioned in the open, Nick, you started Sports Card Madness. Love the name, right? This is madness, kind of is appropriate for this hobby in a good way, and sometimes occasionally bad. Talk about the content creation side. What was it that led you to do it? And now that you're doing it, your thoughts on, when I started in 2018, which seems like, I mean, it's 5 years, 6 years, working on 6 years, seems like eons ago. But when I started, there was not as many podcasts as we have now. So just kind of talk about that, the landscape and the terrain with, starting recently.
Yeah, my co-host and I, we love cards. He's my brother-in-law. We wanted scheduled time to talk about collecting away from our wives. That was kind of the reason we did it. That was the selfish reason. The unselfish reason is, as I've navigated this hobby and learned how to game PSA, get things graded, get the right cards, collect the right things, network in the right places, I realized that there's just a lot of people don't know this stuff. There's a lot of podcasts out there that are like, all right, well, Josh Allen's hot. I'd buy his cards right now. And that's useful information. But we wanted to go a little wider to people who are like, hey, I don't know anything about collecting, but my grandfather passed away and he's got a box of this. What do I do? Do I send it to what is SGC? They don't even know what a grading company is. And we wanted kind of it's almost an educational podcast where we can help, almost like a 101 type thing. We can walk them through what's going on in the collecting world and how you can do things like grading cards. Why would you even grade a card? Something like that. And we've also had great guests on, like we had Walt Frazier on, and we talk about collecting from their perspective. Like, what's it like for him to sign all these cards? And we've had an ex-grader on, talking about, what it's like to grade and how you can, go around the system and things. So it's kind of cool. It's a mix of guests, some educational content, and then just like me and LZ having fun, just talking about the hobby. Like it's awesome.
Yeah, you make a great point too, Nick. We kind of always make the assumption, right? Everyone knows sort of the base level stuff of the hobby, and that's not really always the case. This hobby is growing by the day. There are people coming in, and it's all new terrain for them. And it can, I think you'll agree. I mean, it can be daunting, especially if you're new. It can be daunting when you're not new and have spent 40 years in it, like I have. Things are, the news cycle is a lot quicker than many moons ago. And so it can be challenging. It can be scary maybe to someone who's not as familiar or just getting started. And you make a great point. I love that you said that, right? Hey, we're here to educate. In my case, I try to do similar things, including, someone asks me like, or sometimes I'll get introduced as an expert. And I always try to correct them. Like, I don't consider myself an expert because I'm still learning every day myself. Maybe I'm more experienced is what I'd say, but I don't think anyone's really an expert, just more experienced than maybe someone else. And if I can share some of those like you do even on your podcast, I mean, that's really what it's about, and still learn as we go as well. I think it's important to do that. And like you said, low hanging fruit to say, hey, so-and-so's playing real well right now, buy his cards. I think most of us, I don't want to paint with a broad brush. I think most of us that are in the hobby have some sort of sports fandom. I think it kind of starts there. I'm not saying there aren't people who collect or flip, if you want to go that far, that don't really watch or care about sports. I'm sure they exist, but I think the majority, the bigger numbers, people who are fans of teams, or if even not teams, but players or sports. And so I think a lot of times they know, like, hey, this person's playing well, I'm going to look to buy some of those cards. I don't think, I just think, and there's nothing wrong with that kind of content, but like you said, I think there's more to it than that. You try to do it on different levels, as I do as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a need we found. You don't know how many DMs I get every day that are just like, what do I do with this? Do I grade this? What is grading? And it got to the point where I'm like, let's just do an episode about it. And I literally just send them the episode. Like, listen to this. This will help you buy on eBay. This will help you sell on eBay. That type of thing.
Yeah, no doubt. And I get very similar messages and that sort of thing. Sometimes I'll get some. You might get these too that, hey, I'm not having fun in the hobby. I'm thinking about getting out. And I always try, Nick, to find out what the root cause. Why? What do you think it is? Why are you disgruntled, or why are you not enjoying yourself? It'd be real easy to say, hey, sell your cards, get out. That's, I don't take that approach. I try to find out and, sometimes try a different angle and that, try a different way to do it and that sort of thing. It may reignite that passion. And so I'm sure you get probably similar, takes like that. And I always try, I don't like to hear when people leave the hobby. I know some people sort of, get off my lawn, guy. I was here first. We need less people. I don't think we need less people. I think the more people in the hobby, the better the hobby is. I mean, some may disagree. You don't have to like how certain people hobby, but I always say, as long as it's legal and above board and no one's doing anything, unscrupulous, then to each, hobby your sort of way. My next question kind of is along that line. Fanatics now kind of coming in. The licensing, we got some litigation. That's a whole show in itself. But the licensing will be mostly 75% theirs. Unless something happens before that, in 2026, they've said they want to 10x the hobby. I think that's ambitious, but obviously that's their goal. That's their number. I know you said you're vintage, but doing content creation, you cover the modern market as well. Some of your thoughts with Fanatics kind of take on 10xing the hobby. Your thoughts on that.
So what's interesting to me here is I look at my 15-year-old nephew, right? And I look at myself and I say, how many sports bets have I placed in my entire life? 4, 5, something like that, prior to this boom, right? And I think, how many sports bets will my 15-year-old nephew place in his entire life? And it's probably going to be something more like 40 or 50. So right there, you have a 10x in behavior. And when you have a 10x in behavior, that tends to have a systemic effect on things. And so I think the increase in gambling is going to change the way we watch sports, for better or worse. I'm not here to judge, but it will change, and there might be more viewership. And I also think the hobby is an extension of that, where sometimes I call it like the scratch ticket era. Like, we're in this era where, all these breakers, they're just ripping through packs, and 99% of it's going in the landfill. And, you've got like a hit, and then you sell that, or, the person who signed up for that spot in the break gets it. That's also gambling. And again, I'm not here to judge. Like, I think it's cool, in whatever dose you think is appropriate. As long as you've got the money to spend, have fun. But it's a change, right? Like, we weren't breaking cards in 1988. There weren't inserts until the 90s. So I think that there's been changes along the way. Inserts and parallels have changed that. But now Fanatics, with the gambling boom as a halo around this, I think it's just going to ignite, the gambling in the hobby. So I think, what they're doing is good. I do love the public facing stuff, like the Tom Brady commercials and the different promotions they're doing with, Travis Scott going to a hobby shop. It's pretty wild. Like, we've never seen investment like that before. And no matter what you collect, I think that's going to benefit the hobby, because, somebody listening to Travis Scott might catch that video and be like, cool. I haven't collected cards in 20 years. I'll grab one. So I like things that lift all tides. And if you look at the economics of everything, it feels like where it's going to go. I don't know about 10x, but it's definitely going to go up.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree almost across the board. I don't see 10x either. But it's definitely, it's going to go up with the marketing, like you said, using celebrities outside the sports world. You mentioned the Brady and the Bowman draft as an exposed draftee. Obviously, we know he never actually followed that, went on to become a football legend instead, and a huge one, arguably maybe the greatest one ever. It's great marketing on that part. We see what Bowman draft's doing, the wax prices itself, the Brady cards themselves. Reminds me, Nick, of 91, which on a smaller scale back in 91 when Upper Deck included an SP1 card of Michael Jordan just working out with the White Sox. This was even before he gave baseball a real legitimate crack. They invited him to take batting practice and shag some balls, and Upper Deck got permission to make a card, and that people were ripping 91 Upper Deck like it was going out of style. That card was red hot at the time. Not on the pricing levels that we see the Brady, but it was also different hobby. There wasn't colored versions. It was just the one card. There were no auto SP1s. But this reminds me, the Brady baseball out of Bowman draft reminds me sort of that parallel to 91 Upper Deck baseball with Jordan coming from basketball, in this case Brady from football to a baseball product. And it, like you said, it does pique interest. You got the commercial, which was well done as well. And Brady, arguably one of the biggest names, not even just sports, but as celebrity, and drawn a lot of attention. Where maybe, like you said, someone who used to collect says, hey, the cards are still a thing, apparently. Maybe, it might be where, hey, they still have their cards at their parents' house. And they're like, hey, are my cards still in the attic? Then they dig them out, and it rekindles or reignites, that collecting gene. So I think you're exactly right. I think every day we're getting more people in the hobby. 10X may be ambitious on Fanatics' part, but maybe, who knows, right? They got a lot of smart people in that room that crunch numbers, and so I guess time will tell. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but time will also tell that as well.
Yeah, I agree.
So with that, you wanted to, in your reply, it's one of my bullet points, right? You mentioned the I word, as I like to call it, in the hobby, right? Investment. And, some people hate that word. And, my response, and then I'll get your take on this, people get really passionate about this. I've had people inbox me or even live on, John, cards are not an investment. I don't believe, cards are an investment. And I disagree. I'll even go further. I think anything can be an investment if you choose to use it in that form. They don't have to be. I don't necessarily collect cards to retire on per se. That's what 401ks and pensions and that sort of thing are. But we see what these cards do, cards of significance on auctions, millions of dollars in a lot of cases. When something sells for that, you cannot look at that, to me, in your right mind and not say it's an investment. You don't have to be in the hobby for investment purposes, but even if you're not, you can't poo-poo it and say that some people aren't doing it for investment purposes. So that's always been my stance. I disagree with anyone that says their cards are not. It may not be what me, you, or they do it for per se, but it can be an investment if that's the alley you choose to go down. And that's always been my stance. I heard you. It was a bullet point on my list to cover, and then you kind of segued right into it. I kind of think I know what you might say, but what say you?
Yeah, so I think we actually had a certified financial planner on an episode of Sports Card Madness to cover this. And we kind of asked him, how do you think of cards in your portfolio? The reason we did that is I literally sat down. He's actually my financial planner. And I said, all right, David, I've got stocks covered, I've got real estate covered, I've got bonds covered, I've got private equity covered. What else is there? And he's like, well, there's this weird category of, like art and collectibles and things like that. And I'm like, well, I'm already into sports cards. And that actually prompted me to get more heavily into like high-end vintage stuff that's there's a pop of 4 on or something like that. And the way I look at it is it's a scarce asset with significant demand. It's on par with like I said, gold, modern art, waterfront property, anything that they're not like making more of. It's rare, so it's valuable because it's got a market for it. So I love that. It's a portfolio diversifier. So cards will move in a different direction than stocks or bonds or real estate. They are not correlated in any way, shape, or form, which is great. You want a certain percentage of your overall portfolio to move differently than other things. When something happens, then overall you're doing better. I think there's obviously caveats to this. You're not going to get any cash flow from a sports card. There's no dividend from a sports card. You are banking on appreciation, and that appreciation is taxed a certain way. But absolutely. I mean, look at, the PSA 10 mantle. I think Fogel bought that for 50 grand or 100 grand, and it's worth 10 million. So that's an investment. He held on to something valuable and scarce over a certain period of time. Became more valuable and equally scarce. So I know it's different with modern cards. That's more of like day trading, right? Like, okay, this player's hot. Boom, I'm going to catch him on the All-Star game when he's in the home run derby. I'm going to sell it tomorrow on eBay. I'm going to be pissed if it doesn't ship quick enough so the price changes. That's bananas to me, but people do that, and that's cool. I like the long-term game. That 86 Fleer signed set, that's going to my son. And I can only imagine what that will be worth in 20 years when he decides whatever he wants to do with it, So that's a long-term bet. So you can do both.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you just said. You didn't do that 86, 87 Flair basketball sign set necessarily for the investment per se. Like you said, it's going to be handed down to your son. But at the same time, you can't ignore the value of that if and when it ever would change hands to not kind of think about that, right? It's funny hearing you say that because, it's funny, the people, Nick, that will argue with me that there's no way cards are investment. Anytime like they pull something, right, if they open something, one of the first things even those people say, right, is, what's this worth? What's this going for? So they sort of contradict themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm actually not picking on them because we all do that, right? We may say we don't care. I just enjoyed this card. I don't care. In the end, I don't care what it's worth. But whenever we acquire something, whether it's from a pack, a trade, or just even purchasing it, we do, right? We do care what it's going for in the current market terms, or we're at least somewhat curious, even if we're not, investment, collecting for investment. Just I think that's just human nature. Is like, hey, what's this worth? It's why people go to thrift stores and try to find rare and unique items and get deals on them. It's just, I think it's inherent human nature. I don't think we have to. It's not a bad thing. It's nothing you have to apologize for. So even the people who like swear up and down, there's no way that cards investment. It's sort of the truth comes out when they like, hey, what's this worth, or what do I got here at the same time?
Right. Yeah. I mean, this 86 Fleer set, I put this thing together, I don't know, maybe 70 grand all in. And the duplicates that I've accumulated along the way that I've gotten from guys that I've sent to or whatever, I'm probably net 30 grand into this thing. The set's probably worth 300 grand. So, they could say, I mean, yes, I'm not flipping that set and it's going to my son, but just with a little bit of elbow grease, you 10x your money, and anybody could have done it. I just happened to do it.
Yeah, not easy though. Let's give yourself a little more credit than that. Let's since you brought it up, obviously that was a bullet point. How difficult? Talk about the difficulties of that. Was there one player that stands out as, man, this one's going to, either you knew kind of going in that it was going to be tricky, or you found out after the fact that this one's not going to go as smoothly as some of the other cards?
I ran into this thing bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, thinking this was going to be a breeze, and it was not a breeze. It's chock full of Hall of Famers, right? And the ones that are alive, they do signings. You just mail it in, or they're at shows. Then there's there's 130-ish cards in the base set. Another chunk for the stickers. So it's like 143 all in. I would say half of them, or 40% of them, are just kind of like regular dudes, and you can mail them the card and maybe throw in $20 or something like that, and they'll sign it and mail it back. And then you've got another 25% that are Hall of Famers, and you pay your fee, like for Dr. J or Magic, and they'll sign the card. Then you've got 20 deceased players, which they're not signing the card. So you need to go find those. They're not making any more of those. There's a certain amount on the planet, and then they're gone. And I'd say half of those aren't too bad, but the networking required is bonkers. I had to join the 86 Fleer Facebook group. There's vintage card Facebook groups. I wasn't even on Instagram, and I had to get on Instagram because I just needed to find people that were in the know about these cards. And that got me pretty close. There's a few deceased guys that I would imagine there are probably 20 signed 86 Fleer cards of theirs on the planet, like in attics and in collections, like 20, period. That's the number of sets that can be made. Those were tough. Those were expensive, but I found kind of the right places to find them and pulled it off. Just people who had them. Yeah. And they found me, and it worked out great. And then there's some random ones, man. Like there's a card that it's a Steve Johnson card, but it is not his picture on the card. So as you can imagine, he ended up in that iconic set, and they screwed up his card. He does not like signing that card. So I begged him, and I eventually sent a big check to him with a very nice note, and he finally signed it for me. So that's your difficulty in terms of effort. Like that's the picture there. Then I would say obviously the MJs are difficult in terms of money, right? The 86 Fleer, that's MJ's rookies. He's dunking the ball. To get that signed is a considerable amount of money. The sticker isn't as bad. It's probably about a third of the base, but those are pricey. They're available, every quarter or so at an auction, you'll see one. You can get them, but you got to pay the piper. The rest, with a little sweat and elbow grease, you can get most of them. And not many of them are over a couple hundred. I think Dr. J might be 130. Larry Bird's probably 150. Magic's like 100. They're not going to break the bank. So I'd actually recommend the audience, like, even if you're not going to finish the set, like do a Hall of Fame set, like just get some of these cards and sign them, because at some point, Larry Bird just might be like, I'm done. Like, I'm old. I don't feel like signing stuff anymore. Same thing with Dr. J. Get them while they're here. They're legends. They're here and they're willingly signing. Get their autograph on something,
Yeah, and even, you point out that they may just decide, hey, I'm done signing. I don't want to spend too much time doing this in my golden years of life. Or, I hate to say it, right? We don't live forever. That day comes, and you even mentioned, 20 of the cards you had to get on that level. And, everyone, obviously, probably the Michael Jordan cost-wise might have been the hardest to get on that level. But you even mentioned, the Steve Johnson, like, hey, they messed up. Fleer messed up, put the wrong player on there. And I get it. I don't want to sign that. That's not me. You had to, pony up, unfortunately, to get them. People don't realize that. I mean, no offense to Steve Johnson. He's not a Hall of Fame player. But because of the circumstances, that card became a little more difficult than you think about, that you think it would have been, right?
You are listening to the Sports Card Nation podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Hobby News Daily is your homepage of the hobby, providing original writing, exclusive gem rate data, a daily morning minute podcast, and some of the best content creators in the hobby. Remember, hobbynewsdaily.com and at Hobby News Daily on social. Happy collecting!
Let's go!
You are listening to the Sports Card Nation podcast.
Out of the deceased group, like which one was the harder to obtain, would you say?
Yeah, there's three. It's like the holy trinity of the set. So there's Dan Roundfeld, who, again, not a big time guy or anything like that. He retired the next year, so there wasn't much opportunity to like go to a stadium and get that signed as a kid, right? Some people did it through the mail. That's how I got mine. There was a guy who sent through the mail to him, and I bought it off him like that. So that one's tough. There's probably 10, on the pop report. And like I said, I'll say another 10 in addicts, right? Derek Smith is very difficult because he died in 1996. So, he only had 9 years to sign cards, period, end of story, from this set. And then he was gone. And, signing cards was not popular in the late 80s or early 90s. I mean, So, and then Mike Mitchell, who's, he was kind of a recluse, and those three are, like I said, I think for those three, they determine how many of these sets can ever be made. I know of 2 other full sets in existence. Jeff Wilson of Sports Card Investor has one, although it's not like dual graded and PSA new label like mine, but he's got one. There's another collector I know who has one. It's not graded. And then I have one. So I think, like I said, there's probably 20 that can be made because of those 3 guys. They're the most difficult. And again, it's because they weren't, you were going after Kareem or Magic or Larry Bird, right? You weren't going after Dan Roundfeld unless you were like a really big fan of that team. And those are probably the guys who have these cards, and I've hunted them down.
Yeah, that's a great point. You just kind of finished with. Everyone was chasing the bigger names back then. Autographs have always been a big deal, but not comparatively to current times, not as much then. And I'm old enough to remember like having rookie cards signed was like bugaboo. I was like, no, have a second year card signed. Don't have you're ruining it. You're writing on it. And now as we both know, that is a huge market for signed and authenticated. It's funny how times change and opinions and views change. I grew up where going to a game, like you always brought not the rookie cards to have signed, and the rookie cards you just kept clean but now that's went back the other way. And so many cards in that set, because there weren't cards made for the few years before that, became sort of de facto default rookie cards. And so and then you add the factor that some of these folks passed away not too long after the set was produced, and that degree of difficulty exponentially goes up. It probably was tricky enough as it was, and then they're not here any longer. So kudos to you for putting that set together. Like you said, maybe only 3 exist in the world, and maybe that number you kind of mentioned price wise might be even on the lower end of that when push comes to shove. I know you didn't do it necessarily for that reasons, but it is something that we talk about when we talk about hobby items and that sort of thing. You're putting the other set, what'd you say, 68, 69?
The 1969 tall boys. So those, the white tall boy cards, the Topps basketball. It's like Kareem's rookie, Jared, just tons of like Oscar Robertson. Like it's just a great set,
I would think, you correct me if I'm wrong. To me, that would I think the degree of difficulty is even higher. Now you're talking 20 years, 17 years before. Many more players from that set are probably, unfortunately, no longer with us. Now you're going back further when signing was maybe less people got program signed or the ticket when they were at the game. I'm going to venture a guess this one's going to be a little bit more challenging for you. Agree?
Yeah,
disagree?
I did 86 Fleer in like 4 or 5 months. I'm typically aggressive when I do something. This Topps set is 10 to 20 times harder. I don't think personally more than 5 or 6 of them can possibly ever exist. And there's 2 there are two. I know two people who have them. And so this is going to be like almost like a last shot at it. So after, gosh, I'm 8 months into it and I'm 91 out of 99. The problem with some of the cards, like I've got a Bob Boozer card. Again, not a great big player or anything. It's getting like PSA or somebody to say like, yeah, that's his signature. It's really obscure and it's difficult. I got it from somebody who got it in person, and they're still like, nah, it's inconclusive, and they throw it back to you and give you a refund. So when I say set, I'm saying a slabbed and sealed set. Like that's what I did with 86. That's what I want to pull off with 69. Yeah. So these last 8, I've got leads on like 4 of them, and then there's 2 or 3 that are just it could take years. I will get this together. I know I will finish it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it took me 3 or 4 years to get the last few cards just at the right time, right place. But I'll finish it.
Nick, you ever run into a situation where someone knows what you're trying to do and they play hardball? Maybe they're trying to squeeze a few more extra nickels out of you. Like, hey, I know this guy needs it real bad to finish the set. You ever run into that sort of thing?
I won't name drop here, but like, there's one collector of this set that he kind of takes advantage of the people that like get desperate and like want these cards. And so the fair market value of a specific card could be like $1,500 or something, right? And he'll be like $4,000, give me $4,000 for it. And he'll get it from some people. I refuse, because there's always other fish in the sea. He tried to do that with me, and then I found an ex-dealer out in California with 3 of the cards, and he doesn't want to sell them yet, but he might in the future. And I'm sure I'd rather build a relationship with somebody like that, and then maybe he does me a solid, and and I can help him and that type of thing. But yeah, and you see it like in the 86 Flair group too, man. Like we know what cards are valuable and tough, so they throw it out there for a high price. Some of them are worth that price. It's if it's the last card in your set. This happened to me with Mike Mitchell. I overpaid by 2x for Mike Mitchell because it was the last card. I didn't care. And I put a bounty out there and I said, I'm going to pay this. Whoever's first gets the money. And a couple people popped out and they had it. So yeah, that happens. It's tough. I mean, if you've got something that there's only like 5 or 6 of in the world, the community gets pretty tight. They all kind of know each other and they play games, so it's tricky.
Yeah, that's something I definitely wanted to ask you about, knowing that, like, that's just how the hobby can be. Some people try to take advantage of the situations at hand. Obviously you mail some out. How daunting is that, right? We know how TTM works. Is it always like what percentage that, does it ever happen you send a card out, maybe for a lesser player, and then you just don't get the card back?
Oh yeah, I mean that happens. Like we did a podcast episode about this, like how to get anyone's autograph, right? So you don't just go like mail a bunch of crap out and hope for the best. Like there's a technique to it. So the first and most important one, there are 3 or 4 websites you can go to find out if people sign. There's a free one. It's Sports Card Forum. Just Google like Sports Card Forum TTM. That's free. Go on there, hit basketball or hit whatever sport you're looking for. Type in the name. If they've got a 97% success rate and somebody just got something back yesterday from them, they're a good signer. And it'll even say like, hey, I had to throw in $10, I had to throw in $20 or whatever. So pre-screen, like that's one place. SCN, just Google SCN sports cards. You probably know about this site. It's a great collector site, discussion boards. I think it's like $8 a year or $10 a year. And they'll tell you when public signings are coming up. They'll tell you who's signing through the mail. And then for $20, you can get a hard copy of it's sportscardaddresses.com or sportsaddresslist.com, something like that. He sends you like a binder with just the latest. Every year it gets updated, the latest addresses for people. And it'll tell you on there like tough signer, yes, no. And he'll update you if somebody moves. So use those 3 resources. And then after that, man, it's so easy. Like, I got 40% of this set for free for the cost of like a stamp each way and time, hand cramping, like writing letters and stuff. I would recommend anybody do that. It's even for kids, right? Like it's something I did with my son to help him like learn how to write a letter, learn how to make a request of somebody politely. And it's just like good life skills. Like, and people are surprised. Like, if you get mail nowadays, it's like, whoa, what's this handwritten envelope? Like, that cuts through the noise pretty quick, rather than like a DM or a text. Like, a handwritten envelope, they're going to open it. And sometimes I go even a step further. I'll take like a 9x7. I'll put their picture on it. I'll say, thank you, Jim. And, I'll spend the $3.50 or whatever for the Ground Advantage label, and they're going to open that. You get a package. That's cool. So I'd recommend anybody try it. And I've gotten people that are very difficult. Like Billy Cunningham does not sign. His cards go for $1,000 on eBay. And I put a really nice note together with a picture of my son for the set. Again, it's going to my son. So, and he signed for me. It's crazy. So it's a good lesson.
Yeah, I've told this story on this pod. My dad, we're originally from Brooklyn. My dad obviously grew up in Brooklyn, pretty much lived in Ebbets Field, watching the Brooklyn Dodgers play, meeting many of those guys. It was a different era. Those guys were more personable than maybe today's players are, or time-wise, and, before social media and the internet and that sort of thing. And in the 80s, I was in high school, and my dad was telling the stories about his interactions. And I'm like, Pops, while the Dodgers left before I was born, I became a big Jackie Robinson's my guy. And I became sort of I don't want to say historian, but a fan of the team, after the fact. And I'm like, we should write these guys and tell them what they meant to you and how I learned about them through you. And like you said, it's a great point. We wrote these handwritten letters to each one of these guys that were still alive at the time. And many of them, we sent index cards, and they sent them back signed. But they would send letters back. Thanks for remembering an old Dodger. It brought back memories of my playing days. Some of them said, like, I don't get anything like this. Thank you for remembering me. It was a pleasure playing in Brooklyn. Some of my fondest memories of my playing career, that sort of thing. They were like grateful to even be remembered along those lines. And so hearing you say that with that, just knowing we did that with Brooklyn Dodger players in the about 88, 89, when we did that, me and my dad, I get it, because we, some of them sent, besides letters, they sent like articles and business cards if they were in, other lines of work and that sort of thing. Just pretty cool to get that sort of correspondence and that response, besides the autographs. And I had the books over there, Nick. I have a Brooklyn Dodger binder with 3x5 index cards of many of the players that played in Brooklyn. And again, not necessarily for sale, but it's just part of, my dad has one too, in his collection. And for him, it means a little bit different as someone who got to see those guys up close and personal. For me, it's many of the connections through my dad's stories. And but getting those things back from those guys, a lot of them said, you made my day, you made my week. Some of them told stories in their letter, like, hey, I'm going to lunch with so-and-so. Did you contact him? I'm sure he would be flattered as well. Just stuff on that personal level. It was kind of crazy to think you'd get that sort of response, but yet we did back then. And so hearing you say that with your stories, it makes sense. And going back to the 86, 87 set, with obviously some of the bigger name rookies, Karl Malone, Akeem Olajuwon, are much of those were in person, or did you still, with a card like that, go through the mail process?
Well, they all do signings in person. I think Hakeem does like one a year in Texas. Clyde, same thing. When possible, I liked it in person. So Dr. J, I got in person. He came to, there's a show called the Shriners Show that's probably 300 tables or so out here in Massachusetts. And he came to that last year. I got his triple signed, that 1980 triple with Larry Bird and Magic. I got him to sign that, and other stuff. And That's awesome. Like Cedric Maxwell, he's the speaker. He's an announcer for the Celtics. He does their radio, and I was at the Garden, and he signed my card for me, and he's in that set. So the in-person ones are actually the ones I remember the most, because the mail feels very transactional. You send it to an autograph dealer or an autograph show, you pay your price, it comes back. The in-person thing's cool because you get a few seconds with them, and you can like slip a question in there, or like, Dr. J was like, I got to see like his ring, like he has a ring on. That was cool, So I like it. I like the in-person, but obviously it's just, I'd be flying everywhere, to pull this off.
Yeah, no doubt. And hey, kudos to you. That's just an incredible feat. Like you said, there's probably only 3, maybe 4 that exist. There's 3 that you know about. And with the set being what it is, 20 players no longer with us. That's going to be a very tough feat for anyone to follow and complete as well. One last question before we kind of wrap it up. You have your finger on the pulse of the hobby. I have a thing. I don't do it with every guest or with every episode. I call it the Hobby Magic Wand. It's obviously not a real thing. But if it existed, I hand it to you and say you have one hobby wish. In other words, you can, hey, I don't like this, I'm going to get rid of this, or I want to see more of this, I'm going to make it happen. You get one wish with the Hobby Magic Wand. What are you going to do with it?
I think I would like to see a little less breaking and gambling and flipping and more collecting. And that also sort of means a little less short-term thinking and a little more long-term thinking, whatever that means. Now, of course, you could break and get something you're going to collect long-term. So that works. But I guess overall, it's shifting from short-term thinking about the hobby to long-term thinking about the hobby. It's more healthy.
Yeah, no, I won't argue. I agree. And, I've talked about breaking on multiple occasions on the show. While it has a place, right? Like you said, they fly through those cards. They're looking for that one card. The rest kind of go by the wayside. As someone, that started in 1979, like I did, it's sort of, I cringe when I see that. You walk around the National, look on the tops of the garbage cans, and they're just stacks of cards in there. It's sad to see. I remember, trading my gum back when gum was in packs for my buddies' cards. They wanted the gum and I wanted their cards. And, so to see like stacks of base cards on tops of garbage cans, or watching a break and just see cards just be kind of tossed to the wayside, to me, it's kind of sacrilegious. I know it's a sign of the times, if you will, but I kind of agree. I've said breaking has probably saved the wax industry and sealed, because so much of it gets sold that way. And, the Tops and Fanatics and Upper Decks and Paninis of the world, that's one of their lifelines, is the breaking industry. And if they're telling the truth, they say so themselves. So I understand it has its place. It's definitely not going away, as we both know, but I'd like to see some of that more traditional. And there's plenty of people who do it in that sense, Nick, as we both know. But I agree. I think the healthier the hobby is, like you said, long term. So great answer. And here I agree. I'm waving that pennant with you as well. So as I always do with the guests, any final thoughts, and give out all those socials, where people can catch the show, you on social media, all that. You got as much time as you need.
Sure. Yeah, no, this is a great conversation. I think I'm a little bit younger. So we're cut from the same cloth, I think, with our preference for vintage. That's not saying, there's obviously modern's great. Like if you want to follow your favorite players and collect them. I just have that preference, I guess, because I'm 43, right? If anybody wants to reach out, I'm on Instagram as Boston Card Hunter. Pretty easy to find. You can always DM me. I love answering questions and helping people. I've helped many people start sets or sign sets or, all those places I mentioned as resources, just hit me up and just ask what they are, and I'll send them to you, because it took me a while to find out what they were, and I'd rather save you the trouble. And then, I'm a host of Sports Card Madness podcast. It comes out every Friday. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, anywhere you can find them. We're about 30 episodes in, and there's a pretty good library of like how to and what to do and things like that, but also good guests like Walt Frazier, Nat Turner, and others. So, I'm here. I'm here to help anybody. I love the hobby. I'm a hobby cheerleader. I'm enjoying it. So anybody wants help or advice with collecting, especially sets, just hit me up.
Yeah, I use the 2 A words, Nick, when it comes to good guys in the hobbies, right? Ambassadors and advocates. I think you check both of those boxes. Continued success. We come out on Fridays too, so check out Sports Card Madness and Sports Card Nation same day. 2 birds, 1 stone, so to speak. But
excellent.
Thanks for coming on. Continued success. Good luck with your current set, which you said you're pretty close to, but a little more daunting than the previous one. And I wouldn't even. I know myself. I'm not even wouldn't even attempt it. Not gonna be able to do it. So I'll live vicariously through you. And love to have you back on down the line here as well.
Of course. Thanks again, John.
Want to thank Nick for joining the show. And how about that with those 2 sets, man? It's hard enough to build a new set, with the way Collation is. And not only is he putting those sets together, but every card is authenticated and signed. And in some of these cases, as we talked about, some of these guys are no longer with us. So makes it very difficult, and is going to do whatever the end result is, whether they're left to family or eventually sold, going to be doing very well with those. But kudos for even attempting that, and extra kudos for completion. But check out his socials as he gave out his podcast, and just a really good guy. Glad we'll have him back on, but glad he came on today. All right, we're going to hear from our Hobby is the People announcer this week and some closing thoughts, and we'll wrap up today's episode.
Time for our Hobby is the People announcer of the week.
This is Mike Summer from the Wax Pack Hero Sports Card Minute. Don't forget, the hobby is the people.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People announcer of the week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.
That's a wrap for this week. Huge thanks to you, the listeners out there, because without you, there is no us. If you like the show, we truly appreciate positive reviews. Big ups to our great guests who drive the show and our awesome sponsors who make it all possible. Sports Card Nation will be back next week, but don't forget to catch either Hobby Quick Hits or Card Mentions coming up on Monday. I'll leave you with this. How do we change the world? One random act of kindness at a time. Remember, the hobby is the people.
Iron Sports Cards is your #1 source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
For nearly 50 years, Sports Collectors Digest has been the voice of the hobby, bringing you comprehensive coverage of the sports collectible industry. From industry news, auction results, market analysis, and in-depth stories about collectors and their collections, Sports Collectors Digest has everything you need to know about the hobby. SCD is also your leading source for listings of sports collectible dealers, card shops, card shows, and the latest from the industry's top companies. To check out all the latest news or to subscribe to the hobby's oldest magazine, visit sportscollectorsdigest.com or call 1-800-829-5561.